Hello, my name is Whitley Brown, and this is my critical assignment presentation for EDU 534. I have already written the critical assignment paper, which has been submitted to TaskStream, yay! And this is a breakdown of my paper in PowerPoint form. I first wanted to start with a couple things that I placed in my introduction. I really enjoyed this quote from Nelson Mandela as it says, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And when I think about teaching and the reason why I got into teaching, it wasn't maybe necessarily to change the world, but it was in fact to impact the lives of children. And when you think about their ability to change the world, I think that's what makes education and teaching specifically so extremely exciting. So for the purpose of this paper, I did address the gaps that stem from an overcrowded classroom. And I'm sure we've all been in classrooms that are small and some that are really large, and there's just a different dynamic there. And so as a teacher, and obviously as a former and current student, I thought that this would be a good topic for me to take on. I wrote in my introduction, by reducing classroom size, smaller gaps, such as a lack of creativity, need for teachers to effectively provide better instruction for learners that are struggling, I felt that these were the two main issues that come from it. When I talked about underachieving or low-performing students, I was including ELL, English language learners, underachieving students, as well as special education students. And so when we look at the problem of overcrowded classroom, I think the first thing that comes to mind is this lack of individualized attention. I know in high school, I really appreciated it when I felt like my teacher knew where I was in my project, was there to help me and provide special instruction in terms of tutoring or necessary extra assistance. Bartram recorded, "There should be regular opportunities for learners to reflect and identify what has been learned." And I think it's really interesting that in the classroom, there's not always time for learners to reflect. And I feel like when teachers have less students to focus on in the classroom, there's more opportunity for that reflection phase, which I think is so critical to students as they continue to learn. I skipped a bullet point there. I'll briefly mention that international competition. We have other world powers who are dominating us in certain math or various educational measurement scores. And I think that that should be a concern, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then finally, we don't want to create a society or the next generation to be full of passive learners. We want these people who are taking on their learning and reflecting and kind of growing in that sort of analysis. As we continue on to the next slide, I decided to discuss the aspect of the paper that was related to global comparison. When we think about China and the number of students that they graduated from college in 2015, we're at 7.49 million college graduates. And when I read that statistic, I was just shocked because I was like, I don't know how many America has, but I guarantee it's not as many. And sure enough, we're basically actually a little more than half underneath that at 3 million. And just this idea that another country could be producing such an educated and higher level functioning society in that next generation should be a bit of a concern. You can see I kind of copied from my paper here. Just the sheer contrast in the numbers of college graduates alone proves that this country's educational system, I'm referring to America, if lacking in any area, could be losing its ability to compete in the future. And I just think back to a couple different videos that we saw in regards, I believe it was China and India. And you're just thinking about the economical implications that all of these college graduates have. Now, granted, it may be hard for them to fill some of those jobs, but in reality, that generation of college graduates is turning into the next round of teachers, the next round of politicians, more importantly, engineers. I guess maybe not more importantly, but I'm thinking in terms of things or jobs that could create powerful weapons or be involved in military advances. We're thinking rockets and science and mathematicians and all of these different types of jobs. They have almost 7.5 million people to choose from. We only have 3 million, and we want to ensure that those 3 million are at the highest level of education that they can. Now, granted, that is college, and I have been talking about smaller classroom sizes within within high school. I just think it's important to kind of point that out, because in China, there are obviously a lot of students graduating from high school, if those are their college numbers. And then to compare with the Finnish educational system, this idea of using 3 teachers in the classroom, 2 to kind of be teaching and bouncing back and forth throughout the lesson, and 1 to specifically stand up and monitor those various struggling students. I think that idea is incredible. I don't know what it looks like on a day-to-day basis in terms of lesson planning and who's the lead, and is there a curriculum already set, or are they developing it themselves? But when I saw that, I was just like, wow, this could be something that we could really benefit from in America. And then on top of that, in Finland, all 3 of those teachers would have master's degrees, which I think is really awesome. Moving on to theories and supports, this idea of a smaller classroom size must be addressed realistically. So if we are going to create a solution and make the classroom smaller, they need to make sure that they grab those underachieving or struggling students. It can't just be a blanket decision without thinking of their learning needs first. Australian professor and author Pauline Gibbons explained that the mainstream teacher is currently burdened with overcrowded classrooms. And Cullingford, another author that I analyzed a little bit, said learning is not just a simple accumulation, of knowledge. It is an emotional experience, a difficult rite of passage, and it's demanding and stressful. That is more playing into the psychological background of students when they come into your classroom. But if you think about that psychological struggle, kind of their growth and their development, while also in combination with what the teachers are going through, I feel like it directly points to the fact that there needs to be a support. There needs to be a new change in our current system. In terms of best practice and solutions, I kind of did some research without even including charter and private schools in our current economic and political challenge. It could take decades for this to happen. It could be a while before realistically, financially, and politically this is even possible. So in the short term, there needs to be English language learner and special education strategies being implemented on the behalf of the teacher. And it just needs to create a learning environment that's more conducive for these struggling students. As we look at this, there needs to be a way to manage and document and analyze assessments. And I think that would need to apply not only at the school level, but the district level as well. I kind of wrapped up in my paper with a conclusion, just reiterating the problems I've already discussed here in this PowerPoint, and then just reminding us how important it is to value the education of our students throughout America. This is my references page, and that is the end. Thank you so much for listening.